think it's been 3 or 4 months since I've done a show, maybe 6 months without going live at prisonplanet.tv, but I may not go live at prisonplanet.tv today in the third and fourth hour because I'm just doing back exercises Saturday. I got this terrible crick, and I don't want to be grimacing and stuff on the camera the whole time, but we'll see if the Advil kicks in. If it does, I'll go live. I'll come up in about 30 minutes. But I know those are popular. Folks like to watch, and I'm honored that you do. We get to show you all the documents and proof. In fact, I'm going live. Forget it. It doesn't matter. Maybe somebody can find me more than one Advil then, and that will knock this out. Of course, maybe I'm mentally ill. Maybe I'm imagining that. You know, I mean, if I get arrested for my political speech and then I say that my rights are being violated, they put me in a psychiatric facility because there's no such thing as government oppression. In fact, Doc, I'm kind of cold calling you on this, but I've read them in the past. There's scores of new designations in the last decade where if you don't trust the government or you think you're being oppressed, it's mentally ill. So I guess if I don't like these FEMA camps or I go out and photograph one, I've got to go to the mental institution because it's crazy to not like the FEMA camp.
Well, I mean, the core dynamics of incarceration in a psychiatric facility include the idea that one is somehow a danger to yourself or others, and that's often indicated by the notion that you have a so-called delusion or hallucination. In plain speech, if you want to translate that, that means a false belief or a vision that someone else is not seeing. So that can be used with anything, and that can certainly be used, like you said, with the woman who had the belief that the military installation was going to be an internment camp. That could be declared a delusion, and there you go.
Because it was on an official government list.
Yeah. And so, sure, that's the basic dynamic.
That's the thing. I had the FBI here last week with some subpoena over some trial I'm supposedly going to have to go to. Not a trial of myself, somebody else. But I was saying, look at Eco-Science by John P. Holdren about forced abortion, forced sterilization, and planting us with drugs, time-release sterilants and other. And I said, look, and they wouldn't look at it. Because, see, to them, I mean, who's really living in delusion, Doctor?
Yeah. Well, that's called denial. You know, that's a mechanism called, you know, I see the world the way I want to see it, and I won't look at anything else. You know, whether it's information in that book or whether it's children being blown apart, you know, in Iraq. You know, you just don't see that. What you see is only terrorists that justify aggression and continued bombing, or what you see is only a certain segment of so-called science that justifies a certain position in an action. And you've had it used against you. You have the wits and wherewithal and resources and support and friends and family so you're able to keep going and stay strong and not be so vulnerable, you know. But the thing is that, you know, for most people, it comes down to, are you going to let them call your child a dirty name called ADHD and give them a stimulant drug called speed that's addictive, toxic, brain damaging, heart damaging, and think that you're helping your child? Are you going to have your teenager or your wife or husband who's depressed because they're looking at this horrible reality? They've been listening to too much Alex Jones, and they're reconsidering their life, and they're feeling kind of uncertain about what they thought was real and stuff. Are you going to decide that they have a chemical imbalance, and so all they need is a little Prozac or Paxil to bring them back to life? Are you going to allow them to be stigmatized and drugged and think that it's medicine, and yet you're going to a doctor for help? Or are you going to take I don't know if it's a red pill or the blue pill, but the one that
the red pill,
see reality and to see that those are lies that are used to control and coerce and keep you from facing the real issues of so-called social and economic justice and tyranny and whatever.
Well, Dr. Breeding, I've met your children. They're both good-looking, clean kids, but it wouldn't matter if they had green mohawks. That's their right. And they're about to both go off to college. We were talking about that last week when you were dropping some more books by that we saw in the bookstore, your 2 books. You're telling me Austin cops in your middle-class neighborhood pulled up and said you shouldn't be in your front yard? I mean, that's like this country's gone, because I've got all over the nation where the police declare martial law in towns. In fact, people won't believe it. Google, YouTube, CNN, martial law in town. And they say you got to show papers to leave your neighborhood. You're not allowed to be in your front yard. I mean, the Austin cops pulled up and said, who are you? And then they, I guess, showed them IDs. And then they said, well, you shouldn't be in your front yard. That's suspicious. It
appears that a certain cranky, distrustful neighbor called the police and said, we got some suspicious people out there. And the police took that action and decided, and the part that bothered me the most was that they told these two 16, 17, 18-year-olds that they were looking suspicious by virtue of their act, that they shouldn't stay out in their front yard drawing pictures and talking because that was suspicious, you know.
Well, to a lot of people, actually, I'm starting to run into people that think being able to read or being able to use large words, almost like Idiocracy, the movie, is suspicious. And knowing things is suspicious, and drawing might have been terrifying to some TV head that to them that was so alien that might have looked like a green alien or something out in the front yard.
Well, that reminds me of the teen screen kind of things where they go into the schools, and by the way, this is part of the current public health policy or insurance bill being put forward, is to include school mental health clinics and preventive treatment programs, you know, to bring forward more of this so-called mental health screening that we've been fighting.
That's the model states.
All these years.
The President's New Freedom Initiative said we want to go from 15% of kids on the drugs to 50%.
Yeah, that was Bush's New Freedom Initiative, and now Obama's insurance plan includes these school mental health clinics and preventive treatments that bring more and more of this mental health screening forward as well. So it's like you talk about a lot. You know, it's not about whether it's a Republican or a Democrat who's president. It's about this basic policy push towards more and more expanding of anything that's going to support a basic corporate dynamic.
That's right. It sounds good if they just gave people insurance. That would be, you know, socialism. But if an angel was administering it, it might work. The problem is, as you said, these eugenicists 150 years ago took over all academia. Their mindset runs basically most of medicine, psychiatry, psychology, the culture, and we still haven't gotten rid of this group that are literally waging war against any other idea, any other philosophy, freedom itself. And going over the health care bill, you're right. It is a total federal takeover of everything. Doc, tell us about the psychological perspectives in this.
Well, there's the school mental health clinics, you know, that bring forth more mental health screening, and then also emergency services, which means more and more situations where some quote-unquote benevolent adult will decide that a young person is suicidal or something, and then immediately they're launched off to the psychiatric facility. You know, there's that. There's preventive treatment, sort of like a violence prevention, where you bring in mental health treatment, supposedly that's going to prevent violence. You know, and you've got mental health parity, you know, which means that you've got lifelong mental health benefits to parallel physical health benefits, you know, and problems with that is, one, remember that includes the benefit to be forcibly treated, since psychiatry can treat you forcibly, whereas the rest of medicine can't.
Well, yeah, page 16 of the bill says that if you have insurance at the time of the bill becoming law and change, you'll be required to take a similar plan. If that's not available, you'll be required to take the government option. And under that, when you go in to get the free government health care, they also make you do a psychological screening, just like the Head Start program now. The kids get 3 CPS visits a year and start trying to get them into the system. So, see, they're saying it's free, but it's really a way to get you into the system.
Any kind of quote-unquote screening, I mean, vision screening is one thing, you know, or hearing screening is one thing. But anything that's in the realm of psychological, psychiatric, mental health screening is dangerous. Because
the drug companies write the policies, they have an initiative, an incentive to get you in. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's exactly right. It's basically mass marketing for the drug companies. But the other part is that you have to understand that psychiatry, even though it's a branch of medicine legally and structurally, is not valid medicine. Psychiatric so-called illnesses are just behavior. They're judgments that are put on somebody's behavior, and you cannot diagnose an illness from behavior. You can diagnose disease by finding a physical or chemical abnormality that's confirmable and is consistently present with that disease. This does not happen with any form of so-called mental illness. It's all just somebody's
exactly
about behavior.
I was reading studies from like 1880, 1890 when psychiatry really got going because there were so many people murdering their families, going crazy, chewing off their fingers, going nuts. And there were medical doctors at the time going, no, stop dumping mercury from these giant global industries where they were making plates and painting lead and mercury dyes on them, where they were making mass tanneries, where they were dyeing hats. Mad as a hatter, that term. The point is, England was supplying manufactured goods the whole world at that time. It was the industrial center. Germany was just starting to rise, but most stuff was getting made in England. And so they were dumping it in the water supply, and large portions of people were chemically going nuts because they had mercury and lead and all this in them.